there's a threshold for good faith and also a threshold for intelligence to be able to talk in generality.
Yes, and this is something that I actually get, attacked for all the time, right? I've been very critical of Islam. I'm very critical of the black community, despite the fact that some people may or may not identify me as black. But I will go ahead and acknowledge and confirm stereotypes or truths, even if it doesn't benefit me, because the truth is the truth regardless of who says it. But people have this ego investment where if it doesn't benefit them or it criticizes their people, they feel some sense where they lack this ability to have critical thinking skills. That's actually a sign of low IQ.
We can dive into a little bit more stats here that might get us in trouble, but here we are. We like to talk about race and IQ. And
yeah.
I believe you have a little bit of a shield when we talk about this kind of thing.
Sure.
Though they do call you a Nazi. I don't know how they weigh that one off.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess, they call everyone a Nazi. It's crazy how they call Trump a Nazi. Anyone that is right-wing, even a little bit conservative, they automatically label him a Nazi. So it's one of these terms that has no bearing anymore. No one respects it. It's like the boy who cried wolf. If you have any type of nationalistic beliefs, anything where it comes to pride, conservatism, any right-wing ideology, they're going to label you a Nazi automatically. It's kind of like a badge of honor nowadays. If you're not being called a Nazi, are you even trying? The IQ thing, it's very real, and I think this is something that's very suppressed for obvious reasons, but it is real. And this is something that a lot of people get banned off of social media platforms for talking about. People like Jared Taylor and others have talked about this, and this guy's Yale educated, very smart, very articulate, and they'll try to write him off and say, oh, this is pseudoscience bullshit, but there's meta-analysis that prove this stuff. There is a tie between IQ and race. It is what it is, and people just don't like to absorb the truth a lot of the times, unfortunately.
Right. Charles Murray has dedicated his life to this. He's written multiple books over it, done the meta-analysis that you speak on, and they quit funding the studies because they know the outcome and they don't like the answer.
See, this is the problem when it comes to the minority class and, people that are black, Asian, Hispanic. Well, Asian's not so bad. But people have a problem with acknowledging and accepting realities that don't benefit them, right? So if someone were to say black men commit disproportionate amount of violent crime in the United States representative to their population in America, they're 8% of the population, but they commit somewhere between 40 to 60% of the crime, right? The violent crime. There's two ways to react to that. You can either get offended and say, oh, that's not true, that's bullshit because I'm a part of that class, or you can say, yeah, that's objectively true, and it is what it is, and not put your own personal stake in the situation. But the problem is that people take things personally, right? And, when we talk about stats, we talk about generalities or whatever, this isn't general. It's not everyone. There's always exceptions to the rule. And I think people aren't comfortable with rising up to the level and being the exception to the rule.
I think it's a little bit of, there's a threshold for good faith and also a threshold for intelligence to be able to talk in generalities.
Yes.
And so the ones that don't have that intelligence or don't have the good faith, they can't. And so they take everything personal.
Yeah, and this is something that I actually get, attacked for all the time, right? I've been very critical of Islam, right? I grew up in a Muslim household, but I am very honest and I say Islam simply isn't compatible in a first world democracy like the United States, where we have freedom of speech and some other things that quite frankly go against Sharia law. You can't criticize the prophet, but that is antithetical to the First Amendment, and that obviously would conflict. This is why you go to Arab countries, even the most successful ones, whether poor or rich, are run by monarchs or dictators. And there's a reason for that, right? They're just not democratic countries by way of the religion. I talk about, I'm very critical of the black community, despite the fact that, some people may or may not identify me as black. They might say, oh, you don't count, your family's from Sudan, whatever. Well, look, bro, I think everyone else would identify as black. I check the black box, whatever. But I will go ahead and acknowledge and confirm stereotypes or truths, even if it doesn't benefit me, because the truth is the truth regardless of who says it. So when I say these things, people get angry at me and they say, how can you talk about Muslims like this? You're Muslim. How can you talk about black people like this? It's the truth. Black men do commit a disproportionate amount of violent crime in America, and Sharia law is simply not compatible with a first world democracy. That's just not, it is what it is. But people have this ego investment where if it doesn't benefit them or it criticizes their people, they feel some sense where they lack this ability to have critical thinking skills, right? And I think that's actually a sign of low IQ, not being able to take yourself out of the situation and look at things objectively. Everything is subjective, and that's a skill set in itself.
Well, we talk about saying what is true. We talk about they're calling everyone a Nazi. I think those two kind of go hand in hand. This is the younger generation, specifically most of the younger men on the right are just looking for something to hold on to, if you will. And that's why they're flocking to people like you or in these Christian nationalist circles and things like that. They're looking for a purpose, if you will, or to be liked by other people in a unique way other than catering to their wants?
Well, I'll give you a perfect example today. When we were out there, right, you were there with me, and we were talking, talking about, these facts when it comes to male and female intersexual dynamics. We saw a bunch of guys that took it as an opportunity to kind of bash me and say, oh, you're an asshole, blah, 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 right? And we know why they're doing it. They're doing it to, show off for the girls and simp and everything. And because I knew what his strategy was. I was like, okay, he's using the white knight mating strategy. As much as we make fun of these guys, simping is actually a sexual strategy. It's a sexual strategy that's typically used by lower status men because they don't have the ability to attract women with their actual, vernacular or charisma or charm. So they have to kind of appease more to their ego and say what they want to hear, not knowing that that's actually counterproductive. But they're doing this because they want to feel good and they want to be able to look at like the hero. But the reality is we live in a very feels before real society where they know deep down the things that I'm saying are objectively true, but they want to go ahead and kind of get the support from the women. So they'll go ahead and kind of lie to themselves and the women to feel good. And that's kind of, that's just kind of a microcosm of the bigger problem where people will say things that are complete bullshit if it feels good. And I think we need to kind of abandon that because no one wins when you tell lies, right? It just simply doesn't work, right? And I think this liberalism has shown that perfectly. We want to sit here and say, oh yeah, men can totally turn into women. How did that turn out, right? We got little girls being assaulted by weirdos in a bathroom. Someone was asking like, oh yeah, why do you care about men identifying as women? Or why do you care about men being able to use women's bathrooms, right? I remember the guy earlier, he was saying, why do you care? And I was like, well, for you, you're an able-bodied man. You could defend yourself. But when I say the things that I say, I'm looking out for the children. I have a problem with a little girl being in a bathroom and then some dude coming in and standing and peeing and her observing that. That does something to a child's psyche. We have to do everything in our power to protect children from, realizing these uncomfortable things as long as we can. We kind of have to shield them from this bullshit, or expose them to it in a controlled manner. And I think just allowing people to identify as whatever and put themselves in situations where they're affecting other people's children, that's where I draw the line. And a lot of things that I say, although people might find it offensive, it's always with the kids in mind.
Yeah, we definitely see this liberalization crumbling the system on itself.
Yeah.
You talk about repealing the 19th, and I would advocate for that, along with more stringent voting registrations. But I myself take a issue with democracy in itself, right? It's a rejection of hierarchy, which I think you would maybe agree with.
Yeah, the way we do it right now is not good. Lobbying organizations have too much power. We know which lobby organization is specifically of a place in the Middle East. But yeah, that's something that's completely unacceptable because basically the donors dictate the policy, right?
It's an oligarchy by proxy.
Yeah, it is an oligarchy by proxy. But literally, because if you look at the people that donated to Trump and you look at what he campaigned on versus what he's actually enacting on, well, what he campaigned on, we were promised mass deportations. We were promised to end wars or bring them back in or create peace. We haven't really seen that. What we have seen instead,
Epstein files, 9/11,
yeah,
JFK.
Some of the declassification of this stuff. It took them forever. They kind of released the JFK stuff. They just dragged their feet on the RFK stuff. Epstein's still waiting. 9/11, I'll be shocked if they release that. We're getting deportation of legal college students that are critical of Israel instead of mass deportations that he and Hillman promised of illegal aliens here. And then when you look at who donated to the Trump campaign, well, it makes sense. We're pushing for more AI, more technology, more deregulation. Well, Elon Musk contributed a significant amount of money. Then you see the foreign policy with the Middle East. Miriam Adelson, donated a bunch of money. And then we look at people like Bill Ackman, et cetera, who are, career-long Democrats, but they decided to vote Republican this time. I wonder why. Because of their interests, and that's what we're seeing enacted. So once you follow the money, you're able to kind of assume what's going to happen based on the donors' wants and needs versus what they campaign on.